Hey everyone, welcome to the stream. Sorry, we're a couple minutes late here. I had some camera issues, so hopefully that doesn't stay as the stream's going. So just let me know in the comments if anything's going on with camera issues. But today's been, or the last couple weeks have been a pretty big time for Jujutsu Kaisen, and so I wanted to talk Jujutsu Kaisen today. So today we're going to be doing a ranking of all of the characters in the series. There's a lot of them. We'll see how I do with remembering some of these side characters. And so we'll get into that tier list in a second. I'm going to try to stay spoiler free for most anime onlys. I won't be talking too much manga right away, but with everything that has been going on in the manga, at the end of this tier list, I do want to just give some of my thoughts on the latest chapters of Jujutsu Kaisen. Obviously, it's coming to a close here in 5 chapters. So the beginning of this stream is going to be, I'm going to try to focus on characters that have been introduced in the anime, only talk about them in their anime setting. I'm not going to give any spoilers for what happens with them in the manga. But then once we get to that second half of the video, or second half of the stream, and we'll start talking about manga only characters, and then I'll kind of dive into spoilers there. And so before we kind of get started with Jujutsu Kaisen, just like a couple of channel updates. I hope you guys enjoyed my video on manga cover art. That was like a very different editing style for me and took a lot of different research than kind of normal. A lot of my videos are, kind of based on my own theory on, the themes of the series. And so going into cover art, which was, need to get a lot of facts right, need to, I wanted to look a little bit of the history of manga covers and talk about stuff like Astro Boy, Ashita no Joe. That was a lot of fun. And so I hope you guys check that out. And then we announced on the channel the first, or this month's anime watch along on Patreon will be Ping Pong the Animation. I'm really excited to watch it. It's only 11 episodes, so if you guys are interested, free trial on my Patreon will literally last you the whole watch along, because we're doing 2 episodes a day. That starts on the 26th of this month. I'll talk more about that. There'll be more posts about that, but would love to have you along for that watch along. So we can kind of shift here into the tier list. So I got the tier list here. Hopefully you guys can see it all right. And so again, going to try to keep no spoilers for the manga until we get to manga specific characters. Try to talk vaguely about some of these. The tiers: peak, flawless. Peak is just like, they are some of the best characters, some of my favorite characters in all of shonen. Flawless is, I don't really think they could have done anything differently, and some people will have these characters in peak, but for me, not quite there. Has a purpose, could be a small character, could be a major character. I don't think they're way better than, what we've seen so far, or compared to other characters, they're not way better than any other villains or heroes, but they certainly fulfill a purpose within this story. Miss Potential is kind of going to be, the spot where I wish there was something more, whether it was a character who has a small role and I wanted a bigger role, or a character who has a big role that I think could have been delved into just a bit more. And then Forgettable, there's going to be a lot of side characters looking through this. A few characters that you're like, who is this? Jujutsu Kaisen has that a little bit. There's, a good amount of characters in the series, and a lot of them that pop up for just a short amount of time. So as we're going along, let me know what you think about these characters. In the beginning here, we've got a lot of main characters right away. I might kind of switch it up just a little bit in some of these animes. So we don't go through the big hitters too quickly here, but we can start, I guess, with Itadori. A lot to talk about with him. I actually have Itadori in peak. And I don't know if that's like common. I think he's one of the better Shonen Battle series protagonists. It's really, so his story starts out pretty basic. He has the death of his grandfather, and he's told, try to save as many people as you can. And then he swallows Sukuna's finger because of that. And that kind of leads into his character. And I think what's so interesting about Itadori is, of course, the suffering that he goes through throughout the series. He's kind of like, if you took Guts and put him into Jujutsu Kaisen's story, and they're very different in a lot of ways. And, but in put Guts into a shonen story, I should say. And, the suffering that Itadori continues to go through, is a lot, and I really like how his character is handled. He has had, some manga development that I think is really good. I won't get into it right now. But even, specifically in Shibuya, and kind of his reaction to everything, I think is really telling of the themes of the story. And so yeah, I think Yuji is a phenomenal protagonist for this. He captures the darkness, or he takes on the darkness of Jujutsu Kaisen and still seems to come out on the other side of it. And I think there's a lot to him in his relationship with Mahito, the way they that he kind of eventually sees himself in the same way, that he kills curses in the same way that Mahito kills humans. I think all of that's really interesting, and he's perfect for the story. I think he's really endearing right away. He's never annoying in the same way that like Asta is for the first like how 20-25 chapters, if not longer, of Black Clover. And I think there's a lot of protagonists like that are, a bit annoying in this genre. I don't think Yuji is right away, and I do think he gets as complex as anyone else. I think he's as good as any new generation protagonist, probably alongside Denji. I think, from the mid 2010s on, the last 10 years, Yuji is definitely one of the best protagonists we've seen, without a doubt. And then moving on to, first, I guess I kind of want to throw his grandfather in there. Um, I do think he has a purpose. It's kind of easy to talk about him right now because Yuji, of course, this is the inciting incident for how Yuji is going to approach every situation moving forward. He has a purpose. He's close to missed potential. Like, I do think maybe he could have been better woven into the narrative. In my character death Jujutsu Kaisen video, I did talk about how I think, he has obviously he has like a kind of a narrative function, more of an emotional function for Yuji that leads Yuji to make different decisions, but he isn't woven into the Jujutsu sorcerer world. And so because of that, maybe I'll put him at missed potential actually. I think they could have just gone a little bit further with him. Like, you think of Aaron's mom in the beginning of Attack on Titan, and her death has impact and makes sense and sets up every element of the story, where Yuji's grandfather isn't quite that way. He only is like half of it. He's the emotional side of it. But he's close to has a purpose. Like, he's, kind of whatever, I think, in the series. So I guess I'll go to Megumi, who I'll put in flawless. I love Megumi. I think he's very good at his, the secondary main character kind of role. I definitely don't think he's peak. He has a few moments that just you know, don't stand out to me quite as much as Yuji. But I do, and compared to characters like Killua, Vegeta, um, all these secondary Bakugo even, for some newer shonen and Aki, like Megumi's good, but not necessarily on the level that they are. And so I think Yuji fulfills and goes kind of above and beyond what we see from a lot of shonen protagonists. Megumi is maybe slightly less in that secondary leading role, compared to some of these other characters that we see within the genre. And so because of that, I put him in flawless. Like, I think he's still above has a purpose though. Like, the way he always tries to kill himself is like so funny, I think, and fitting for the story, and kind of his tragic relationship with his dad, and their battle in Shibuya is so phenomenal. So like there's no denying Megumi has some great moments. He actually has some of the highlights of season 1. His final fight at the end, and you see him use his domain expansion, is really, really good, I think. So yeah, there's like great moments, and yeah, he does kind of, he out of season 1, I would say that maybe Megumi is my favorite of the trio. But then Yuji by the end of Shibuya like takes that for sure. Nobara, I'm gonna put in has a purpose. Do we know if she's alive or not? I don't know. And so I think she did a great job at showing the cruelty of the world and what happened to her in Shibuya, the brutality of every conflict. Um, if she comes back, if she doesn't come back, it's a hot talking point. Um, it really depends on how it's executed because I think it could work either way. Um, I don't know if I would necessarily put her in flawless because she wasn't the greatest character before Shibuya happens. And so, she's good. She is, I think she, is a nice switch up compared to Yuji and Megumi, but she doesn't really move me like some other side characters I feel like should with, 2 seasons of content. Um, I do think her, dying, whether if it actually happened or not, um, is really great for the Shibuya incident. And, she was not as interesting of a character, so I don't think it's this huge loss of potential that maybe some other people do. Like, I think there's plenty of other characters that are more interesting, but she was in a really unique position to be a massive gut punch when it happened to really hone in on the suffering and brutality of Jujutsu Kaisen's world. And so because of that, I do think she fills her purpose really well. And depending on how they respond to her death or how they respond to her coming back, whatever happens, could maybe move her up to flawless because the response to it in the manga so far has been a bit head scratching because there just hasn't been a lot of content there. Now we're getting to a lot of peak here. Gojo is absolutely, I mean, he's the character of the entire series. Got our first comment in here. Thanks, Jules. Yay, another ranking stream. These were so fun. I'm glad you enjoy them. It's been a lot of fun just talking characters and, plot points of these shows. And so I hope you guys all enjoy it. And I'm excited to talk some Jujutsu Kaisen for sure. Gojo, I think, will probably be most people's favorite. He's a great example of the strongest character type of archetype that's, been talked about so much, in anime discourse recently. He's instantly likable. He's so cool, insane design. He's in the middle of so many of the best fights in the series. And his philosophy is really interesting. The flashback arc is such a nice change of pace for the story, hidden inventory. And he does a great job leading as like the protagonist for this like 5 or 6 episode stretch, which is just fantastic. His relationship with Geto is so good. And what happens to him in Shibuya is shocking. His response to it is arguably even better in how he reassures faith back into Yuta and his students. And it's so awesome to see a character as strong as Gojo is, believe in humanity and believe in himself. And he has a tragic history. His backstory, even when you learn about how all of the curses go into hiding because of him, like just thinking about Gojo as a plot device beyond a character, he's like so interesting. He has such, importance to the entire story. And then his character is great beyond that. You love him and feel terrible when he gets sealed. And then, there's some other really good stuff with him later in the story. I feel like Gojo is basically the character that draws people in more than Yuji. Gojo is the figurehead of Jujutsu Kaisen in terms of, he does carry season 1 over Megumi. And anytime you see Gojo, it's just like awesome things are going to be happening. And I love his outlook on life. And just his tragic relationship with his best friend is just unbelievably good, and how he's still looking after all of these people is also incredible. So moving into Maki, this is an interesting one because if we were just talking the anime, I think Maki would be a bit lower, and I won't say too much yet when I kind of go over everything at the end, I will. So for any of the anime onlys, I won't say too much, except I adore Maki, and she is one of my favorite characters in Jujutsu Kaisen. Uh, I think the first two seasons lay a really good groundwork for her. Season one, I mean, her conflict of, not being able to use cursed energy is really good. And then moving into, the Shibuya incident and her seeing Toji and how incredibly powerful Toji is just phenomenal. And it lays the groundwork for her to really get a lot stronger. And the way that that happens in right before the Calling Games and leading into the biggest arcs, I definitely think Maki is one of the very best characters in the series. And I do think the first two seasons, she's like one of the better side characters. She's really interesting. Her struggle's really compelling. And you can see the potential for her character. We're getting a lot of peak right away here, but I absolutely adore Maki. I love everything that happens with her in the manga. And I think she was a flawless character up to Shibuya. She becomes a peak character post post anime where we're at in the manga. Just like she is phenomenal. And so this is a quite a strong trio we've started out with. Unumaki is probably flawless. To maybe has a purpose. I think he's really fun, and his curse technique shows a really cool angle to Gege's world building and power system. But I do think his character gets sidelined quite a bit, and obviously he's just like not really in Shibuya. And then beyond that, he never quite he just hasn't got as many moments as I would have liked, but he's really good in season one, and he does a great job at showing. Actually, I'm going to move him down to has a purpose. I think he's good, and actually maybe below Nobara. He has a purpose. He develops the world building, but he doesn't quite take it to the next level after that. And that kind of disappoints me a little bit, because I do think he could have been a really great character, but not disappointing enough that I would put him in missed potential. But I do enjoy him. And then Panda is probably flawless. He has some really great manga stuff. His backstory, you learn in the manga, is so good. And he's, a fun gimmick. I love watching him run in the first opening. It's just like cracks me up. It's just like insane stuff. I think a lot of people like Panda. Like, how could you not? And basically his backstory is what puts him from has a purpose to flawless. I think he's a really great character. And I just realized I was supposed to tweet that I'm streaming, so I'm going to do that real quick while we're talking. Make sure my Twitter audience can come join along the stream. But yeah, Panda's a great character. I don't know. Do you guys all like Panda? I think he's really funny. Great backstory. Yeah, in the manga, he has some really, really great moments. And so I don't know. I think he's a bit of a meme. Let me send this real quick. But yeah, Panda's a bit of a meme, but I love him. How can you not love him, right? All right. Sorry about that. And then, but that is kind of a perfect little break into a character that I think is really interesting and is really divisive, and that's Yuta. Before I rank Yuta, he is, I feel like a lot of people don't love him. And maybe they did, when Jujutsu Kaisen 0 came out. And then he's kind of started to get some hate. I think a lot of people think he's in the missed potential category. I am not one of those people. I think he's one of the best characters in Jujutsu Kaisen, and I think he's probably right behind Yuji. Yuta comes in, and his own backstory is so fulfilling and interesting. It's like, you feel that he could have been the main character, and I think, if I have my information right that was a potential place that Gege wanted to take the story originally, with him and Rika, and his relationship with Rika is really good. I like his ability to steal or copy cursed techniques. I think that's really interesting, and the fact that he could have been the main character is phenomenal. This is a lot of this is based on, if you're an anime only, you've just seen him in the movie, he's really good, and now it's like, oh, okay, he's going to take out Itadori. And I think a lot of stuff that happens right in the lead into the Culling games, throughout the Culling games and into this final arc, really great stuff. I'm actually working on a video called In Defense of Yuta, because I think people are really hard on him. And so I think he fulfills a great role in the story. I love his presence. I love his contrasting perspective with Yuji and his over planning, even though it gets memed on. And yeah, I think Yuta's phenomenal. One of my favorite characters. I love his design too. His ability, like how strong he is also really interesting. That most stories don't just introduce this like, oh, this could have been the protagonist. He's actually insanely strong. And then, oh, I'm going to, just going to give you his backstory. And then, 50 episodes in, he's going to pop back into the narrative and, say, I'm going to take out your protagonist. Like, it's just really great stuff. And I think the memes are funny about him, but I definitely don't take them seriously. May, I think she's missed potential. I think she could have been really great. Her and Maki's relationship is, some of the most compelling stuff of, the competition in season 1, and then she just doesn't get much else. And what happens to her in the manga definitely helps, a couple other characters, but for her herself, I think there's missed potential on the board. I just, when I think back to her, she's just so overshadowed by Maki as a character that I feel like she's just could have been a lot better. And honestly, I feel that way with a lot of these other students who we see in season 1, like definitely missed potential. He has maybe a good moment or two in the manga. She's forgettable. I actually think Miwa fills purpose. I like her relationship with Mekamaru, and I actually think Mekamaru's a pretty interesting character. Mekamaru, his tragic little arc right into the lead in to Shibuya is fantastic. And I love that. And I feel like he fills a purpose. I didn't need any more from him. He stays around, obviously, trying to kind of make good on, the path that he took. And his relationship with Miwa is really tragic and a nice little mini relationship and arc that I think is really fantastic. Todo, I think, is flawless. He's not quite a peak character for me. He's maybe a bit too memey. I actually think he gets a lot better. I love him in Shibuya. Like the way that he's able to lift Yuji up in that moment is so fantastic. He's kind of funny when he comes first is introduced. He is maybe the greatest meme actually in the entire series with him playing ping pong. He's a great presence on screen, adds a lot of life and personality. I don't think his character reaches the depth of the 4 above him. But like you can't sit here and be like, yeah, he only fills a purpose or he, had more potential to be fulfilled. Like he just is a phenomenal side character who I love on screen, but I don't necessarily find myself wanting a lot more of him at other times. Harada's definitely forgettable, just like uninteresting. And Junpei, I love actually, and I put Junpei in flawless. He is above fills a purpose because the purpose he fulfills on really showing Yuji, being that friend and him dying and Yuji not being able to save him and Yuji getting laughed at because of it by Sukuna and Mahito is, I think the best part of season 1. outside of maybe, Megumi's a couple of the fights at the end in Gojo, but like really the core of season 1 is Junpei and his death and his manipulation at the hands of Mahito. And so because of that, I think he's definitely a flawless character. I still think back to him multiple times when reading the manga, and current chapters, we're in the 200s and he still comes back into my head. And I think, that whole reaction with him is just so fantastic, and so heartbreaking. And so I think he's really good. Yaga's probably missed potential. Like he's close to forgettable. He has an interesting moment, in the manga after where the anime is at, but nothing that puts him up to has a purpose. I don't think. I think he could have been explored a little bit more. And that's maybe one little theme that I think is going to come out of this is that there are a handful of characters within the Jujutsu sorcerer world that isn't one of our main few, and that isn't a villain that I'm interested in learning more about. And that we don't get as much as I would have liked, especially some of these characters that are introduced in season 1. But one of these characters that is awesome from season 1 is Nanami. And Nanami is like so good. Everyone loves him. One of the most lovable characters. His ending is brutal, but it's insane how much he fights, and his, he never works overtime is just like so relatable. And it's really fun to see that kind of a perspective in this, power fantasy series, and see how when he pushes himself beyond that, like he doesn't have a domain, even though it feels like he could, because he doesn't want to be working this much. And and that costs him in the end. Like you wonder if he really had strived to be the strongest, as strong as he possibly could have been. Maybe events in Shibuya go a little differently, but on the other hand, you can't expect a person, like Nanami to give everything to Jujutsu sorcery when it's a job, and so I love that angle to him. Obviously, his mentorship with Yuji is, next to none good. It's so fantastic. And him leaving everything to Yuji just is the perfect bow on his character. I don't know if he's quite in the story long enough for him to reach these couple other characters. I mean, maybe you can make that argument with Yuta because he's just like not in it for the first, while in the beginning. But Nanami's a great character. I love him. Everyone loves him. Fan favorite. Another forgettable, and then Mei is Miss Potential, I think. And I put her at the top of Miss Potential mainly because I think she had the most Miss Potential, so maybe she should be lower, but that's kind of a weird tier list. But Mei is, I like her in Shibuya, even though she's kind of weird near the end of it. Some weird moments there, but I do think she could have been like an S tier character. And, this might be kind of a common theme with some of the female characters in Jujutsu Kaisen, is a lot of them are missed potential or forgettable for me. And Mei had the chance to be really explored in an interesting way, and she's just not quite so. And so because of that, she's so powerful. Her outlook on life is nuts, and you just don't get that much with her. So it's kind of a bummer, I think. I'm going to put our boy. He's definitely has a purpose. I love him. These next couple are all, I actually think he's below Miss Potential. I cannot believe, what is it? Kusakabe? I cannot believe he got a cover. It's insane that he's on the cover of volume 13. He did nothing. And even though that actually the design of that cover is pretty good, I think he's forgettable. I do not think he's a very interesting character. And he's so forgettable that I don't even think he's in Miss Potential. And it blows my mind that he is a cover. Maybe it makes more sense, but him having a cover is a bit insane. I don't know. I don't know if you guys think he's, is there more to him? Maybe I didn't read between the lines. I get that feeling when I think about him because there's so little there. And yet he's on the cover of a Shibuya incident. manga volume. Like that is insane. And I know he has like a little moment with Sukuna, but it's like, yeah, this guy I don't care for, don't care about. Um, I'm gonna put Miss Potential here as well. Just another character I would have loved to learn a little bit more about. Would have loved to see a little bit more from him. And I'm gonna put Forgettable here. There's a lot of side characters in Jujutsu Kaisen, and a lot of which are just like really background, I think. Suguru Geto is probably, I'm gonna put him at the top of Flawless. He's not quite, I think a lot of people have him in peak, and I just think his impact, like not his impact, but his role in the story is not quite peak level for me. He's a great character. His relationship with Gojo is phenomenal. I think he's really interesting in Jujutsu Kaisen 0. Um, but you really only get him there in a hidden inventory. And I do think his turn is maybe a bit quick for him to be peak. Like he's a great character. It's a great twist. It's a heartbreaking twist of his philosophical change. But I do think it maybe happened a bit sooner than I would have anticipated. Or, than was earned, I think I should say. Yeah, Gato not in peak. Yeah, it's just he's kind of, I don't know. I feel like I got on a short kind of flamed for not including him a bit higher in terms of the writing, but there's so many peak characters in this series that I don't want to have too many. So he could be bumped. I think there's a good chance he'll end at the top of Flawless, but I can think of 3 other characters that I think of that are probably, I think, are a little bit better written than him, that are all going to be in peak. But he is like, I feel like I'm coming at this from a negative sense because of the perception around him, but he's a great character. Like, don't get me wrong. Like you couldn't have asked for more from him. It just, for me, he didn't quite reach that extra level. Kenjiku is, it does not, he should be in peak, and it's kind of a bummer that he's not. He's another character that I'm kind of coming at this from like a little bit of a negative, little bit of a negative sense, which is his reveal is so good in Shibuya, and his whole plotting throughout is phenomenal. The plan of the merger, all of the strings being pulled, and the history on this crazy sorcerer that has been, is like trying to enact this merger for so long. And his next level planning is phenomenal. How some things happen in the Colon games and how some things happen beyond that is continues to just stack him up. Now, he's a little bit higher than this. He should be, you're right. As I'm talking about it, I'm like, wait, all this stuff's really great. There are some really great stuff with him in the Colon games, a lot of great stuff with him post. But I do think the reception to a few things that have happened recently, and kind of how that's been handled, it has the opportunity to move him up to peak. But for right now, he's just a slight tier below, but that's like, he's a great character. He's another one like Gato, or Ghetto, that is, a lot of people I think might have in peak, but for me is just like slightly below that. And then Sukuna, I think, is probably right above Kenjiku. And I think Kenjiku's a great character. I think Sukuna and his philosophy is really interesting. There's been a lot of arguments, and hopefully this isn't too much manga talk, but of him not getting a backstory, or are we going to get a backstory from him? And I don't really think you need it. Like, I think we have a lot of information about him that makes him really compelling as a character and as a villain. And this mainly the stuff that has been done, is just phenomenal in this last arc. And he's another, we've got 4 or 5 chapters left, depending on how the ending is handled. I think Sukuna and Kenjiku could both be peak characters. But right now they're just slightly below that because it's kind of a toss up. But I do prefer Sukuna slightly. I think his presence on screen is so good. He's been involved in so many great fights, and this is a battle shonen series, right? Like, fights are everything here. And as we're talking through this, it's like, man, there's so many great characters in this show. It's unbelievable how many good characters there are for it only to be 270 chapters, which sounds like a lot, but when you compare it to the 1000 of One Piece, it really isn't. Um, and then Mahito is a peak villain for me. And I'm going to put him right below Yuta, but he really is the villain that stands out to me as like the actual villain, his uh, kind of opposite of Yuji, both of their development, the way that he kills Junpei, the way that he kills so many people in Shibuya, and then his kind of pathetic ending at the end of Shibuya is just phenomenal. And the more you think about him, the better he is. His dynamic with Yuji is as good as you get in shonen battle manga. I love it. I love how it's portrayed through action. His cursed or his domain expansion is super interesting. The transfigured humans is such a brutal technique that he uses, but fits so well for him and the kind of darkness of the story. So I really think Mahito is peak shonen. I do think he's like on the level of some of the best um, villains. And even though he isn't necessarily as iconic as Sukuna, and Sukuna is like, you compare him, he's like this series Pain, he's like this series Aizen. Mahito is not that, right? He's like Ulquiorra. And lo and behold, I actually think Ulquiorra is more interesting than Aizen, even though Aizen has some great moments. And so I think Mahito's role in the story is phenomenal. Sukuna, depending on how these final few chapters, I think could pass him. Like, I think that is the potential we have in these next couple of chapters. But I can't go off a promise. And everything we've got with Mahito is just like so S tier. I love it so much. And this one might shock some people. I think people like him, but Jogo's is a peak character for me as well. His kind of separation from the other curses, I think, is really interesting, from the special grade curses, in how he has this noble pursuit in a way when you really look at it, and he thinks so lowly of humans, that it's so interesting to see how he acts in that early season and how he gets humbled by Gojo, and then his fight with Sukuna and the way that ends it's a good moment for Sukuna, and it's an amazing moment for Jogo. Jogo is probably a bit higher for me than maybe some others. I just personally love him so much. Is it Axek? Xez asks, could Yuta copy Malevolent Shrine? That is really interesting. I feel like possibly. I think it's something that is achievable, but in the same way that we've seen Yuta copy some things recently in the manga, that it seems to me that it could be possible, but I don't really know exactly how he would achieve that. Also, I forgot to mention Yuta's domain that you see in the manga is just so good. I love it so much. But that is an interesting question. I'm not probably knowledgeable enough on the intricacies of some of the power system of the story to fully be like yes or no. So if anyone watching is like, yes, this is something Yuta could do, or no, like let me know. But I would think he could. But I don't think it would be probably something plausible, like not a plausible plan. Out of his thousands of plans, not one that he would probably go. If Rika is the queen of curses, wouldn't that mean Rika and Sukuna were married? That's kind of funny. Yeah, they are the duo, aren't they? Rika and Sukuna. Yeah, so powerful, and I love Yuta. I love Rika, and Sukuna is great as well. That's really interesting. I never thought of that before. Next up, we got Hanami, who I like a little bit less than Jogo. I think Hanami is a good character. I just don't think Hanami reaches the same depth that Jogo does. And it's really shocking, honestly. Specifically, that final fight and kind of how he acts in Shibuya is another level of character writing. Um, Dagon has a purpose. Fun battle, and that's kind of all I remember, right? Of Dagon. And I don't think we needed much more because Shibuya is so perfect already. But I definitely think not quite missed potential. Like Jogo fulfills that potential for Dagon and Hanami. Could Toji beat Yaki? It's an interesting question. I don't know. What do you think? I feel like I lean Toji in most fights. Like with proper planning, I think Toji can beat just about anyone. Um, and also, did you mean Yuki? I assumed you meant Yuki. Um, but I lean Toji there, if that is who you meant. Moving into the Curse Womb, probably miss potential. Like honestly, with all of the battles that go like on a miss potential to forgettable. Like with all the battles that go on later on in the series, you think of this for Megumi, not necessarily for Curse Womb. The special the special grade baddie, yes. Yeah. I lean Toji, but Yuki's a really interesting character too. And it would be, I mean, it'd be close. I don't know if we've had enough evidence of Yuki fighting to really be able to figure that out, but I'm sure some of the deeper power scalers out there probably know. But I would pick Toji if I had to make a bet on it. Choso is a phenomenal character. One of the better villains, and I'm going to put him below Sukuna. Although I feel like Nanami's getting low here. Yeah, I'm going to put Choso right below Nanami. I love Choso in Shibuya and how he is the main person to flip sides. I think that's a really important and critical aspect to the Shibuya incident is, this feeling that at any moment people could flip their allegiance, and at any moment, the whole chessboard all the pieces could be on different sides. And Choso captures that and, actually takes that to the extreme by switching sides. And then his relationship with Yuji's great. And he has some awesome manga moments, like 100%. Like I think him after Shibuya is probably the bottom of flawless. Him in the manga is, right in the ballpark with Kenjaku, Nanami, Junpei. They're all phenomenal characters. What if the 15 fingers were given to different sorcerers? You're hitting me with a lot of world building questions that are really good. And I feel like I have like very uncertain answers for all of them. That would be an interesting strategy. Like I really don't know like what would happen. I never thought about that before. Like, what if they all just formed into Sukuna immediately? Like, I wonder if that would happen. Like, does there need to be like the seal around them? Like, I'm not really sure what would happen. And also, I'm curious. Axe says, who's your favorite character in the series? And I think we've got Choso's brothers are both forgettable. Like they're only memorable because of a Choso, but I don't think we needed more from them. Urame is someone who's could get flamed if certain things don't happen in the next couple of chapters. If you're caught up to the manga, I think she has purpose. I don't think it's Arame's an incredible character by any means, but interesting enough. Serving Sukuna and then also helping Kenjaku. A nice pawn side villain. Yeah, I would like to know maybe a little more about her, but a fine character for sure. And then I think we've got a string of forgettable characters. All of a sudden, like honestly, most of these characters, like I don't feel one way or another. All right. favorite villain between Mahito and Sukuna, hero between Nanami, Yuji, and Gojo. All phenomenal picks. Um, you're not quite on the Maki Yuta bandwagon that I'm on, but I think that's fair enough. Uh, yeah, Mahito and Sukuna, so good. Um, and obviously, Nanami being in like the top 3 or a peak kind of category is definitely reasonable. I love Nanami. Um, I think Miguel has some missed potential. He's kind of handled weird in Jujutsu Kaisen 0, and he comes back in the manga a little bit, and it doesn't fully pay off necessarily. Haruta, I actually think has a purpose. A funny placement for him right there, but yeah, I think in Shibuya he's really good. Him being stronger than Nobara is just like a really telling moment when Nanami just absolutely wipes the floor with him. I love the little power scaling details. Did you know JJK0 took only 4 months to make? I did not know that. That's insane if that is the case. Like, I think that the film, I'm thinking you're referring to the film's production of it, and it's really phenomenal. If it is done in that short amount of time, we're to a couple other. There's going to be a handful of forgettable characters. And, as we move in, we're getting close to manga only, but not quite there yet. Hikari will be kind of the first like manga specific. But with some of these forgettable, I'll kind of talk about a lot of them generally. Rika, I think, has a purpose, and she's pretty good. I'll put her right there. Her story in Jujutsu Kaisen 0 is great, and I love her, just like the world building, power scaling of her. Akari screen time, hopefully soon enough in these final chapters, or else there's going to be rioting, I think, from the Jujutsu Kaisen fandom. I think we've got a couple of I'm going to put, a couple of these characters, like, all is that he was a pal, with Nanami. I think you could have gotten a little more from him. And then I'm going to put them together. Or I actually think is Rico better than Rika? I think so. It's kind of funny. I feel like I prefer Rico slightly more because Rika has a really awesome world building impact, and obviously the relationship with Yuta is great. But Rico and her, importance to the development of Gojo and Geto, which fundamentally sets everything up in the story, I think is just slightly better. Like, she's not an insane character, but definitely has a purpose. Toji, which I think everyone loves. I'm going to put him right behind Nanami. I think Toji's great. I love his how he is in Hidden Inventory. Him coming back, I think, works really well. Amazing fights. He's the perfect kind of like force to really shake things for the story. He just doesn't quite get to the level, I think, of some of these other really, really great characters, but like, I love Toji. And I think what's really interesting about him or the kind of the most nuanced scene is Gojo seeing him is really great. Denji versus Composite Yuji. Who would win? Very interesting. I probably lean Denji. Like, Denji goes through some stuff in Chainsaw Man. They're both, I think, the best. There was on Twitter recently, there was a whole thing about who's better, Denji or Yuji. Like, I think they're equally the best, protagonists of this genre over the last 10 to 12 years. Not counting like sports anime, but shonen battle power fantasy type of genre. I think both of them are really interesting. I think if you like one, you probably are going to like the other. Like if you like Chainsaw Man, you're going to like Juju, and vice versa. I don't really know which one I like more, like as a story and as a character. Like I probably go back and forth between Yuji and Denji. Like Yuji's just gotten so many great moments recently in the manga that it's hard not to lean him. And they both, you know, are in their series do have very different tones, I think. But in terms of a fight, like Chainsaw Man be doing a lot. And but I don't know, maybe Yuji is stronger. I don't know if it like the power scaling of Jujutsu Kaisen's world is just like on another level, but I do think Denji is really strong and like just gets stronger. And you know, depending on what Yuji's domain's looking like, that could I think make a difference. Um Ino, sad. I liked him. I actually think he's missed potential. I would have liked a little more from him. I think he has some great moments in Shibuya, and not a lot of great later on. Um, Forgettable. I'm not a fan of him and Mei Mei. Like he's such a meme that I don't enjoy. Um, I love the 24 frames a second ability, and because of that, I'm putting him in Has a Purpose. Like the 24 frames a second ability is so great, um, super interesting, and so true. Like, uh, why mess with frame rates? Like, I love that it brings that into like this insane world building here. Like, 24 frames a second looks brilliant. It looks like how movement looks. Let's stop with the 60 frames a second. It just doesn't look very good. Um, I'm tired of Gear 5 Luffy fans thinking he can solo anyone just because he had Toon Force. There are different levels of Toon Force, uh, like Luffy and Bugs Bunny. JJK power scale is planetary. Um, yeah, I mean, I do love Gear 5 because I think it is just like really great thematically. And obviously, that's like where I often am going to how does it fit with the tone and the ideas of the story. Um, I don't necessarily think on like a raw power scaling level that Gear 5 is the pinnacle of everything. And yeah, this is just making me want to like do a little more research into the power scaling of Jujutsu Kaisen. Um, but I do think it is an interesting. I think Gear 5's. I really like the design of it, but I also love the evolution of Yuji and his powers. I think we've got two more definitely forgettable. Like the forgettable is kind of in any order. She's kind of funny in Shibuya, and I actually think I'm gonna put him in Has a Purpose. And it's not necessarily that I think like he's a better character than Mei Mei or Ino, but like he, I just love his backstory of talking about curses and how cursed spirits used to move around, and then he sees this little old Gojo walking down the street, you know, walking along, having his day in the sun, and he looks up and there's just all these curses trying to kill him, and he just freezes them. Like that moment through this character, I think is good enough to like make him have a purpose. I don't think he's probably a better character than Mei Mei, but like Mei Mei could have been so much better. So that's why I think these kind of creatures like Moraga is they're both and Has a Purpose. Like I didn't need more from them, but we probably could have gotten more from them. And then Yuki, I think is the I'm leaning Toppa Has a Purpose, bottom of Flawless. I mean, I really like her, and I think she has some pretty good moments, especially in the Calling games. Like, but she's probably right behind Nabara, um, or you know, she does have some good moments. I'll put her at the bottom of Flawless. Like, I do really like her. I do think she gets a little more than people maybe give her credit for in the story. So I think she fits the Flawless. Like, I think she could have been a peak character. I think a lot, you know, Gege is so good at writing characters that there's a lot of potential peak out there. But you don't necessarily get enough with her. And so now this is officially the end of all the anime characters. We have moved into manga territory. So if you are an anime only, there will be some light manga spoilers. Or there will probably just be straight up spoilers because after this, if you're a manga reader, don't forget I'm gonna talk a little bit about the last couple chapters of the story and just kind of my thoughts on the direction of Jujutsu Kaisen leading into the ending. So stick around for that. It won't be too much longer until we get to that discussion because it's just so interesting, I think. So yeah, to wrap up, like my peak characters and Yuta's, some of these are from the manga, but Gojo, Maki, Yuji, Yuta, Mahito, and Jogo, I think are all phenomenal. But obviously, I love this cast. There's so many great characters. So now moving into a bit of manga spoiler territory. Hikari is the character that needs a little bit of time in the manga, needs his fight wrapped up. I don't necessarily like him quite as much as others. He has a really interesting ability. I think he plays a similar role to Yuki in the story, honestly. Like, I think both of them are pretty similar characters. I enjoy him. I think he's interesting. I love him on screen, but he doesn't necessarily blow me away. But I do want to see the ending to this fight. I think she could have had a little bit more potential. She's with Hikari in the Calling games, and some of these character names are about to start bleeding together. And we'll talk about, maybe my one criticism of so far of Juju, kind of in a second here with some of the characters. But she's pretty interesting. Naoa, I actually think is really good, and I think he has a purpose, and I think he fulfills it really well. Or sorry, yeah, has a purpose. He's really close with Nobara. His relationship with Maki and him wanting to be the head of the clan, like that. When I started reading that, it was just like, I'm so interested to see what happens with the Zenin clan and the relationships here. And he's, the reason for that, I think. And so, yeah, I find him really compelling, actually, even though he's not in it for super long. I didn't include, there's a couple here at the end that I probably won't include, which are the curse or like different forms of specific characters. I'm still viewing them as the same character, like they're not like a difference. But I do think that helps him, him staying in the story a bit longer is a good thing. Maki's father, I think, is a bit of missed potential, or maybe bottom of has a purpose. Like, he's fine. I like his, the pressure he put on Maki is definitely interesting, but he doesn't really go beyond that. Tengen is good, I think. A lot of has a purpose though early on with these manga characters. Tengen was maybe a bit disappointing for how built up he is throughout the manga, I think. And so because of that, I put him a bit lower maybe. And now we're getting into, I kind of want to go to or talk about briefly. So there's a lot of these characters that are going to come up, specifically like, Reggie and, Bernard and some of these characters that are introduced in the Calling games that I don't necessarily like them as a collective. I think are interesting, and I think they work to the feeling of the Calling games, but I don't think as many of them really landed with as much impact as you would want. And so I'm going to kind of mass put a handful of them, into forgettable, because I think they introduce so many, but you don't quite get enough of any of them that it really impacts me on a specific character level. There are some, and obviously we'll talk about that in a moment, but I think there's a lot of characters in the Calling games that maybe together has a purpose, which is creating this really awesome feeling at the start of the Calling games of all of these players introduced. It has a succession war feel to it, I think, but it is going for, like I talked about in my video, on Jujutsu Kaisen, on Shibuya and the Chimera Ant arc, that the Succession War is all about character. Where here it's all about pace and feeling, I think. And so a lot of the individual characters introduced in the Culling games didn't quite hit for me, but some of them did, of course. And honestly, it's pretty easy to see. Like the ones with colored, images, that means that they probably hit a little bit more than some of these. So I'm going to put a lot of these into forgettable. I'm just going to put them at the end, and when we wrap up here, I'll again go over that point. But I think a lot of these side characters, Reggie's a bit better, maybe. I just think a lot of them are forgettable. Like I just am not interested. I think Reggie. I'll put a couple in Has a Purpose. Reggie was interesting. I really like our sumo guy. It's probably because I like Maki. And a couple of these kind of right here. But so I do think there's a lot of Culling games, a lot of characters introduced, and a lot of them that don't get the light of day because the momentum of that plot is so high, which I think is like kind of justified, right? But there is one character that is introduced that is absolutely S tier, one of the best characters in the entire series, and that's Higurama, who I actually have as my fourth favorite character. Um, his technique is so fascinating. His backstory is so good, and his relationship with Yuji takes it to another level. Where, he his morality on justice and how that transforms, um, into this twisted perspective, through the justice system, and how he's been, working as a lawyer for so long, and then he kills everyone, and then he's, you know, almost like in a depression. And then when Yuji comes up to him, and their battle and relationship, and how Yuji, it's a huge moment for Yuji too. And another reason why Yuji is like really in peak, like it's phenomenal. That whole battle is the peak of the Culling games. When Yuji owns up to the killing, even though he didn't do it in Shibuya, um, is just phenomenal. Like it's so good. Like I do want to make a video on the Culling games, maybe in anticipation for season 3 and kind of the build up to the Culling games. And like Higurama or Higurumu, Ruma. My pronunciations right now are off the charts bad. But he's phenomenal. And I really want to talk about him in a video because thematically he's so rich. The honored one, to be for real, Junpei should be and has a purpose. You could be right. The reason I put Junpei up there is I just find myself when I'm reading the manga coming back to his story for so long. But I do think like he is kind of a character like that. Like he's small, he's not in it for long, and his death does have a purpose for pushing the themes and the relationship between Yuji and Mahito. But I think just how it's executed is so well that it's elevated a little bit for me because I just think about him all the time, even when reading things like the Culling games and the showdown here at the end. Hello, thank you for joining the chat. Let me know who your favorite Jujutsu Kaisen character is. But yeah, the Culling games is something I definitely want to make a video on. And I do think maybe its light flaw is that some of these side characters could have been drawn out a little bit more. I think Angel, has a purpose. I think a couple of these has a purpose. I do like this fight with Yuta. I think Kashima was really good, but not like good enough. I'm going to put it above Tengen or maybe right below. My favorite is Jogo and Yuta. Great picks. Also, 2 peak for me. It would have been interesting to see them interact. I think they're both really, really interesting characters. And yeah, it would have been really fun to see them interact, I think. I love Yuta and Jogo, and it's always fun seeing characters you know think might not have interacted to who actually interact. Um, why Gojo? I asked him who his favorite character was, and so at least for me, Jogo's up top because he in peak because he just has, I think out of all the special grade curses, him and Maito, there's just so much nuance to them. They're so different in their perspectives. Um, when will I go live again? So I've been going once a week at different times, typically around, 6 Central Standard Time, like on Tuesday through Thursday. But my next stream will actually be this Sunday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. I want to talk really specifically about Jujutsu Kaisen 267. A lot of my audience is on YouTube at that time, so I want to try to experiment streaming a bit earlier in the mornings. So you can be on the lookout for that. And we're going to talk a bunch of things because I want to start adding more segments into my streams instead of just long tier lists. So not sure exactly all the subjects, but Jujutsu Kaisen will be one of them. The Honored One. My favorite JJ character is Itadori, Geto. Is that Hian, Sukuna, Megumi, and Gojo? All great picks. Yeah, Megumi, I feel like maybe I should have higher here. I don't know. Sukuna's great. Yeah, I think Geto is one that is close to peak. And I think is probably one that a lot of people would have in peak. So I think that's a great list. I feel like Jogo would have been the main character if the bad guys were the protagonists. It's a really good way to put it. He'd be the main character. Sukuna would all of a sudden become Gojo and be just a fun little world we're living in. I think she's kind of forgettable. He is phenomenal. He is definitely above Has a Purpose. I'm actually going to put him right above Panda, and his fight with Kenjiku is so good. I love it. Now, I do think I want a little more from Kenjiku, or just a little more about him, to maybe put him up in Flawless. But like the way that battle unfolded, I think so good, and in turned a meme battle into something really interesting. I didn't love him. He's okay. I do think he fills a purpose. He's probably right here. And then another forgettable. So this is and so these three, I'm just like still counting them in terms of, just like who their character is. If they go through a little change, like I'm still viewing that as the character. And then, yeah, it's true. Like that's one of the brilliant things about their fight. Is between Sukuna and Gojo is that it has this feeling that, well, yeah, Gojo, I think maybe in a straight up fight would have won. And that's what's so great about it. And I think that's what I love about that fight, and why it reminds me, there's so many similarities between Jujutsu Kaisen and Hunter x Hunter, and they're two of my favorite stories ever. And it reminds me a lot of Crollo versus Hisoka, where it's like, I feel like Hisoka actually would have won, but that's not really what happens here. And then let's see. I have my own OC of JJK. His name is Gaia. His domain is Devil's Garden, which is a blacksmith with red roses that cursed objects and curses can come out, including Sukuna. That's definitely really interesting. God, thinking about domains and the way that they're used in the show is just like so fascinating. Do you think Nobara is missed potential, or do you think her tragic death is what makes her good? Well, I definitely lean that she's not necessarily missed potential. I think that's a term that can get thrown around a lot. It missed potential in terms of a character taking a direction that I didn't expect them to be. Um, but I don't think she's necessarily missed potential. Like, and yeah, maybe she should be in Flawless. The honored one. I'd put Nobar in the middle of Flawless and Has a Purpose. Um, yeah, she's really close to Flawless. I actually might bump her up in just a second here. Because I do think looking at some of these other characters, she does feel a little bit better than them. I don't think she's missed potential because I think she fits the theme and the setting of Jujutsu Kaisen really well. And in the brutal deaths that do happen in the story are critical, I think, for Gege's pacing to work properly. And so a lot of people can say like, well, I wish we really got a lot of her. You know, she doesn't really go through a huge development, and she could have, and that's certainly true. But I don't think that necessarily is taking the view of what Gege's trying to do and his intentions with the story. And obviously, like, authorial intent doesn't matter. And like, but I try when I'm looking at it to not put too much of, I wish they, you know, he would have taken this direction instead of just trying to see like why did he do that and what interesting like things kind of see out of it. So I think it makes her good. And I do think if she comes back, which you know, could be a thing, I think it could be done interesting. It's not necessarily the way I would go with the story, but you know, it, if Gege pulls it off with, you know, the quality of writing that he's done so far in the story, then it should be pretty interesting. Yeah, like I mean, I think she fulfills her role. I'm actually gonna move her up. Like I love her purpose in the story, and I think she's a good character. Um, so yeah, this turns out that I've got 7 peak characters in Jujutsu Kaisen with Gojo, Maki, Itadori, Higuruma, Yuta, Mahito, and Jogo. But there's all the flawless are like so good. And a lot of them, it's personal preference and just that they happen to really work for me, or if I find them particularly interesting. And a lot of them have potential to move up or down depending on how these few chapters go. Um, and so briefly, I do want to discuss just like the last couple of chapters, just kind of vaguely, nothing too specific. I won't bring anything up. I might do that on Sunday here. If we read through 267, I know the leaks are up and are ready for it, but just kind of vaguely want to talk about the story. So if you're caught up, you know, feel free to stay. But I really do think 265 and 266 were like some of the best chapters in the story so far. And I think they really put a great cap on Yuji's development. You know, 265 and that conversation, I tweeted about this, and I kind of want to reiterate here. I think it shows Gege's ability or the effect when you use action as your main vessel of storytelling for so long. It shows how a single conversation hits with such impact when you know, when it juxtaposes, you know, all of your story being action based in the same way that like most stories is all conversation based, and then random acts of violence punctuate big moments. And you know, it's the violence being purposeful is really what we're looking for in stories like these. And in shonen battle series, it just means that violence is ever present, right? Like it's the main way to tell stories is action and violence. And you compare like the violence of Shibuya, and the reason that, you know, I made a video on why Shibuya Instant isn't mindless action. And you know, kind of the thesis for that is there's major storytelling being done through each fight, and each fight has consequences and things change. And you compare it to like, you know, you can think about major action movies like a Transformer movie or something where the action isn't purposeful, and there is no storytelling through it. It is just like visual mess. And then you see how, you know, I'm a huge film buff, so I watch a lot of movies. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen any Shane Black films. Kind of a random person to bring up, but this relates to Jujutsu Kaisen, I promise. But Shane Black, he actually did Iron Man 3. He wrote and directed The Nice Guys, and he's directed a ton of movies, or wrote a ton of movies like Lethal Weapon. And his signature is he has this really interesting perspective on violence where it happens randomly and abruptly, and it always has consequences, or it's always used for interesting effects. But he's also an amazing writer of dialogue. And so a lot of his dialogue and characters are so well drawn and conversations are really interesting. And then all of a sudden, boom, violence happens. And it's so impactful. And it's the opposite effect in Jujutsu Kaisen, where it's action all the time. It's the storytelling language of this manga. And then when you have a conversation like 265, it hits with just like an insane impact. And I think that's why everyone was gassing that chapter up as the best of the series so far, arguably. Like multiple people made videos about that, and I think that's why. And I think it's really cool to see something that, you know, I've thought about in like film be applied here in manga. My favorite chapter is the Shibuya chapters and 200 to 262. Yeah, I mean, all great. I do think, you know, I kind of want to do an arc ranking, maybe. That would be a lot longer of a talk. I'd need to like draft points for it and not just like ramble like I did here for Jujutsu Kaisen. But I think Shibuya is probably my favorite run of the story, even though the showdown right now is really good. Yeah, I'm excited to see how these last few chapters go. I do think there's a few little plot threads that I think need to get wrapped up. But 265, I think, is a great show of how Gege does know where he's going. And even though Twitter and a lot of people are freaking out about the direction of the story, it is just a common thing, I think, for weekly titles to have the endings be overreacting. People overreact negatively to the endings of these stories because there's so many characters. Like, look at all the characters I have in Forgettable here. There's no doubt that like 3 or 4 of them are someone's favorite character. Right? Like people, I'm sure, adore some of these characters that I just like barely even touched on in this hour and 20 minutes of talking about all the characters in Jujutsu Kaisen. And so leading into the ending, it's like if their characters don't get a moment, or if there's a plot line that you were really interested in that doesn't get wrapped up like you wanted it to, I think that's how like Attack on Titan, people way overreacted to the ending there. Tokyo Ghoul, people way overreacted to that ending. And I think it'll be similar here. I think so far, even though the leaks of 267 are interesting and not necessarily how I would have done things, you know, I'm trying to keep it in perspective here. An arc ranking would be cool. Yeah, I would love to do that. Maybe I will do that. Let me send a link to this arc ranking in just a second here. If my computer will work here, I'll send it to you guys. I'll put it in the chat here in just a moment. It should be sending. Yeah, this one was really good because it had all the names on it, which I didn't want to take the time to do. So hopefully that works for you guys. But yeah, I would love to do an arc ranking. Like the arc ranking of One Piece was enough content. The arc or the match ranking of Haikyuu was enough. So maybe I'll throw one in on Sunday, or, you know, a mini one when I do a bunch of things. I think would be pretty fun. Yeah, I'm not ready for it either. It's going to be pretty, it's going to be a bloodbath, I think, on like Twitter and people's reactions to it. And also just so sad because it's something that's been with us for so long, right? Make a tier list for manga covers. I should definitely do that. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. I don't know if you guys watched that yet, but I hope you guys enjoyed the editing of that video. It was very different than what I normally do editing wise, and I had a lot of fun working on it. So let me know if you did, because it's, you know, gotten a slow view start. All my non-Haikyuu videos do. So I hope it picks up a little bit, because I think I do really think it's one of my best videos I've made. And that would be really fun. I was actually thinking about that earlier, of arc ranking manga covers, and I could do some for specific series, and then I could do overall series, I think would be really fun. I don't have a channel Instagram, no. I think I made one years and years ago, but not really active on it. Yeah, the best place to find me is Twitter, which I know is such a terrible place now. But it is kind of still the best way I think to communicate with a lot of the creators and anime fans. And there's still a lot of people that I've been mutuals with for years on Twitter, so it's hard for me to break that. So you should give me a follow there for sure if you have one. Um, but yeah, I love the characters of Jujutsu Kaisen. Let me know if there's other kind of rankings, like an arc ranking, talking about covers. I have been floating around the idea, and to the couple of people still in this live stream, I'll float it to you guys, or to anyone watching this live stream back. I have really enjoyed streaming, and I kind of want to turn it into more segmented, kind of shows where I talk about multiple different topics that are kind of popular. Maybe of course still do some tier rankings, but I can talk about the newest One Piece chapter for 15, 20 minutes, talk about Jujutsu Kaisen for a few minutes, and then maybe turn those into smaller videos on a second channel. So I can do kind of a big recording here. And then, if you guys miss the streams and you just are interested in my opinion on Jujutsu Kaisen or opinion on XYZ series, I think that would be a really interesting thing to do for the channel. So be on the lookout. I might be making a second channel just for like streaming uploads and like clips, I guess. And then have you done a One Piece character ranking or just the arcs? Just the arcs for now. This is actually, I think it's only my 4th stream. So I definitely could make a character one. I would have to cut it down a little bit to just like all the best characters, because there's so many, and I don't know if I could sit and do all 1,000 of them. But yeah, I'd be interested in doing that because I could talk One Piece for days. And yeah, if y'all want more One Piece videos, more of these different kind of videos, definitely would be something I'm interested in doing. And then something that could really grow a second channel, talking about all these different series, I think would be really fun, and talking about new chapters every week. Do you play Cookie Run Kingdom? I do not. I've not heard of it. I don't play a ton of games. I would be interested in trying some. I mainly play like TCGs. So like I'll play Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh! And some Master Duel and stuff like that, and the One Piece card game. I don't know. There's something about like holding physical cards that I really enjoy. But I do play other games. Like I attempted Elden Ring and Final Fantasies like that. But if there's games that you think would be fun for me to stream, I would definitely be open to playing some games on stream and kind of working that into my weekly routine with a stream or two a week. I try a bunch of different things. I think that would be really interesting. I have heard of Flesh and Blood. I've not played it before. I've heard it's phenomenal. I feel like the reason Magic was the first card game that I really got into besides like Yu-Gi-Oh! When I was a kid. And I adore Magic. I don't love some of the decisions that like they've made higher up in the game, and the game's just so expensive. And I feel like I've heard Flesh and Blood is phenomenal, but I know it's also like a pretty expensive game. So it's like hard to justify getting into it. But if a lot of my viewers are into it, I definitely would get into it because I'm always looking for new card games. So do you play a lot of Flesh and Blood, or, compared to other TCGs, that's something that you found is like your favorite? Because I've actually found Yu-Gi-Oh! To be really fun recently, even though for years I was like, no, like Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a kid's game. I'm a Magic player. And Yu-Gi-Oh! Is actually really complicated and interesting. And then you should try it out. And then I compete in Florida. That is awesome. I'm in Texas. So very cool. Yeah, I definitely, should look into Flesh and Blood because it's a really interesting game, I think. If you react to your subscribers' videos after this might be a good live stream. That could be pretty fun. Also just like reacting to videos in general, I think would be pretty interesting for the anime community. Um, so do we have a couple of Flesh and Blood fans in the chat? That's pretty huge if we do. What's Flesh and Blood's, is there an app or is there, an online service to play it that is widely used like, Master Duel or like, Magic Arena or, Magic Online? Is there something for Flesh and Blood that I should check out for it? And but yeah, and also wrapping up, you know, I feel like this is a pretty good tier list. I don't think I would change much. Um, some of the missed potential are more just like um, I think could have had a little bit more to do with the characters, but I think most of them are either, yeah, this is a side in Jujutsu Kaisen's cast. I think this is a side character that, they fulfill their role just fine. Like, they're maybe forgettable, but they didn't need to be memorable, or they're like has a purpose to great. Like Jujutsu Kaisen has a phenomenal cast. I believe you can play it in Tabletop Simulator. Okay, I'll check it out and see, and if I kind of get interesting. Uh, yeah, I just play it in person. That's kind of what the creators want it as. I mean, that is really cool because I adore uh paper card games, and like I'm way more likely to play paper, but it would be interesting to maybe stream and have some people show me the ropes. It could be kind of fun if there's a way to do that. So maybe I'll look into it. I've also been playing Lorcana recently because like that's the way you can get my girlfriend to play card games, is that I couldn't get her into Magic, couldn't get her into Yu-Gi-Oh, but Lorcana and some Disney characters did it. And yeah, I've heard Flesh and Blood's a phenomenal game, so I definitely will check it out. And if some viewers are into it, then I'd love to have some streams talking card games, because I think that's super fun. And that's another thing about Yu-Gi-Oh that I think is great, is they have great content on YouTube of deck profiles and things like that that are really, really fun to talk about. So yeah, thanks again. This would probably wrap up the stream. I think I'm excited to see how the next couple chapters of Jujutsu Kaisen go. I'm going to be streaming Sunday around 10 a.m. Central Standard Time to talk some more Jujutsu Kaisen, maybe talk a little One Piece, and maybe I'll probably try to look up a tier list or two, something fun to do. And so that'll probably get scheduled on the channel on tomorrow or the day after. I have a really fun Haikyuu video coming out about aces in Haikyuu that I think will be really good. Check out the manga cover video if you haven't yet. I think that video is really some of my best work, and so I hope you all really enjoy it. I've not said anything about Beast Yeast. Was that a game itself, or is that in reference to Flesh and Blood? And then I do have a Discord server. It is through Patreon. So there's like a free trial for a week. So if you check out Patreon, you can hop in. There's only a handful of us in there right now. It's trying to grow it a little bit. The main reason it's like that is because I've been doing these watch-alongs, and we're watching Ping Pong the Animation starting the 26th. So if you're interested in trying that out, that one will only take like 7 days. But so if you're interested in checking out what Patreon's like, checking out what the watch-alongs are like, the bottom tier gets you access to it. And if you want to kind of hang out, I would recommend doing it on like the 26th, because then you can do the full watch-along where you just watch episodes on your own and then to see what people are saying about it. And that's only Ping Pong the Animation's only 11 episodes. So if you do it on Sunday or Monday, then you get that free trial through the whole thing. But any support is super appreciated to try to like keep making videos like this. So that's kind of where Discord is at right now. Yeah, so hopefully see you then. Yeah, I don't know, I feel like some of my notifications have been kind of weird with some other people I've talked to, but I'll look into Flesh and Blood. So I'm sure I'll see you in the streams, Ian. And yeah, and if I do, I'll let you know if I've checked out Flesh and Blood, and kind of let you know what some of my thoughts are on it. And then Cookie Run Kingdom, maybe message didn't send. Yeah, I'll look into it. I'll look into Cookie Run Kingdom. I'll look into Flesh and Blood. Maybe we'll talk about them on the next stream. And yeah, I really want to make these streams a little more multifaceted, versus just like talking a tier list, but have a little bit of different segments, reoccurring things that we can discuss, maybe some games I play, and really just get to hang out with you guys more. So yeah, thanks for hanging out with me for this hour and a half, and I'll see you guys on Sunday, and we can talk some more Jujutsu Kaisen. So see you then.